Welcome back. Politicians getting involved in business affairs is nothing new, but Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has made some headlines in recent weeks, calling for a breakup of so-called Big Sandwich, upset that Apple won't let Android users use iMessage. Let's break it down with Yaël Ossowski from the Consumer Choice Center up late with me tonight here on the Final Five. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Jim. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, we were laughing because the term Big Sandwich was used because there's this acquisition of Subway by a holding company that owns Jersey Mike's and other big hoagie, grinder, whatever you want to call them, makers. But it is kind of a serious concern why politicians would get involved in something like this.
Yeah, I think it's just the latest iteration of any kind of business transaction, normal business dealing that would normally something we'd read about in the newspaper, Wall Street Journal, actually coming on the desk of a politician and them saying, okay, we have to do something about it. There's a role for government. We need to figure out what the adequate proportion is of our population to the number of sandwich shops. There's always some kind of algorithm they come up with. And they always view that there's a role for government to be sure that there's a big guy that's not quelching the small guy. So it's a way for the economic populism to continue to ring true. And they sort of use antitrust as a battering ram. And that's just the latest example with Elizabeth Warren.
And as we look at the acquisition here, and again, there are these large holding companies that are involved in all facets of U.S. industry. I mean, there are fast food restaurants that I believe, for years, Arby's and Wendy's, they were under the same umbrella. I mean, we're seeing this. This is nothing new here, and I think we laughed at the idea of quote unquote Big Sandwich, but there is, on the one hand, the concerns over monopolies, which I understand. That's something the FTC has investigated countless times. But again, it is a United States senator in a time where there may be arguably other concerns in this world, laser focused on this.
Yeah, and it's not just the sandwiches. There have been a number of other mergers or acquisitions that she's very, very against. A big one has to do with the big grocery store chains. You want to have this large merger of the various grocery stores.
Which, by the way, just to interrupt, because for people at home who know, we're talking about the Kroger Albertsons, which would affect Harris Teeter stores around here, around the D.C. area, Safeway as well. Continue.
Yeah, so that is one that has been on the docket of the FTC. We've had various Democratic senators weigh in. There have been various meetings. I've been a part of those, listening to complaints, some members of the unions, some of the people who represent the companies. It's a contentious affair, and we totally understand it. However, this is just another example where Elizabeth Warren is going around some of these institutions and letting the people know that the U.S. Senate, and through her lawmaking authority, will also make her voice heard on this. And in a way, it's sort of adding to the populist message of what's happening through Biden's FTC right now. And again, we mentioned the sandwiches, we mentioned this merger. There are other mergers and acquisitions in healthcare as well. And there's also been a lot of recent attempts through legislation from Elizabeth Warren to crack down on tech companies as well. Most obvious, whether it be Apple or any of the big tech companies, there's basically one example for every single kind of technology that you might use, Jim.
And speaking of technology, it goes down to this idea that there was an app that was released that was allowing Android users to tap into the iMessage network, which obviously is something that iPhone users like myself, you break it down by who gets the green bubble when they text you and who gets the blue bubble when they text you. Apple put the kibosh on this third-party app, and that's another thing that Senator Warren made her voice known on. But once again, it comes down to this idea of innovation, and do moves like this squelch the idea and the appetite for innovation, especially in the big tech industry?
Yeah, and this one's kind of personal to me because I've kind of, as an iPhone user, sought a way that I can use this. I looked into it. I was able to find a bunch of tools online. Some of them worked. But really, when I looked under the hood, you're breaking the encryption that Apple provides you by giving you that blue bubble. So in a way, I was taking more of a risk. So I can understand why Apple would take that step, and it's absolutely their right to do in their own app store. But again, this is not something that a U.S. senator should care about. There was a bill that was right in front of the Senate about warrantless spying and FISA and extending all of the different extensions to not just our federal FBI or but our state and local government, giving them the right to spy on our phones, to have these sort of warrants where they don't need much proof. That is something that's in front of her, and she has the power to stop. These kind of questions about what a various company might be doing on this app or that app, it's just not something that's appropriate for government. It's a type of new progressivism that, we think about Huey Long and the progressive era of the 1920s. Now we're talking about Elizabeth Warren and many of people who are in cahoots with her that focus on this new anti-tech sort of pro-Luddite message of the progressivism of the year 2023.
And I want to be clear, too. One of the reasons I was piqued about this topic was a couple of weeks ago, we talked about on the show, you had the likes of Ted Cruz, the polar opposite of Elizabeth Warren, who wanted to investigate the marketing techniques that Anheuser-Busch decided to embark on when it came to that now infamous Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light controversy that led Anheuser-Busch into a pretty rough couple of months here. So we're seeing this idea from different angles, but politicians once again getting involved in what are by and large private business affairs. So it's a tradition that doesn't know partisan lines. It's just the approaches seem to be different here.
Absolutely. And, there's a reason that Michael Jordan used to say Republicans wear sneakers too. Back then it was celebrities or athletes who didn't want to get too involved in politics. Now it's the complete opposite. Politics is all about culture. It's all about figuring out how they can get involved in the latest controversy. It's no surprise that Ted Cruz has a podcast that he puts out 3 days a week to follow every outrage. Democratic politicians is the same. We kind of have this blend of political and media life now that doesn't exist just right there on your phone. It's kind of what they're living in the chambers each and every day. It's kind of a sad reality, but it's a weird kind of social media network. I would hope that we could keep the government more accountable with that. But again, who's that for me to say? That's for all of your listeners and viewers to decide.
Yaël Ossowski from the Consumer Choice Center. Good to see you again, my friend. Take care.
Thank you so much, Jim. All the best.
And the Final Five is back right after this.